Hey, this is The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer, powered by 6 Hour Never Settle. I had a choice what I carried in combat. I always carried the best. I first one like the P320. I have a number myself. So 6 Hour is always out there with the best technology and best options you have for personal protection. Never settle. And also, we are on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network, also available on the America Out Loud Podcast Network as well. Check us out. ProjectSentinel.net, LondonCenter.org. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble. And here we are with another show. Today, we are joined by John Christmas. John is a former banker whose banking career ended when he became a whistleblower. Gee, that sounds familiar. And his employer covered it up. Let's strike that. Chris, edit this out and I'll start again. John Christmas is a former banker who his career, strike that. Part two, sorry. We're joined today by John Christmas, who's a former banker whose banking career ended when his whistleblowing against his employer was covered up by the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. He earned a BA at Dartmouth College and a BA at Cornell University, and he wrote a book called KGB Banker. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for inviting me. I'm confident I have something interesting for your audience today.
I'm sure you do. So, and the book is available. The book is available at kgbbanker.com. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The publisher is Sunbury Press of Pennsylvania. It's on Amazon, or you can go to our own website, kgbbanker.com.
Great. So I look forward to having people go check it out. So here we go. So John, tell us a little bit about yourself. Clearly, I'm a whistleblower, as you know. We've, I think, shared that experience. People don't understand. You don't normally seek to be a whistleblower. It's more about events that you witness that help shape your decisions. So tell us about kind of how you became a banker and how you then chose to become a whistleblower.
Well, this whole experience has been eye-opening because a lot of things happened that were far different from what I would have anticipated. I was just a normal banker in the United States, and I worked for a bank in Chicago for a while, and I worked for a bank in Buffalo for a while. And I'm partly of Latvian heritage, so I have some contacts in Latvia, including through the American Chamber of Commerce in Latvia. And through them, I got recruited to be frontman, you could say, for this bank, which was the largest in the country at that time. And there was some kind of prestige with being their Western face or their Western representative, going to conferences and meeting people to represent the bank. There were rumors swirling around about it, but otherwise things, bad rumors that they were the mafia, but some good things. They had the major Western ratings agencies rating them. They had a Big Four auditor signing off on their accounts. They said that since Latvia is joining the European Union, that we have regulation that is compliant with European Union rules, but it has turned into a big mess, really connecting straight up to the Kremlin, and with all sorts of organizations fighting to cover up what I did, including that main one you mentioned, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. But
right.
It makes a dynamite thriller. I mean, in real life, it was a disappointment that a lot of money got stolen. That could have, a lot of crime could have been prevented if people acted differently. But at least the good ending of it is I met William Burton McCormick, my co-author, who's a professional author. He's great with suspense, character development. I mean, he put together a dynamite book together with me. I mean, we had a great working relationship and hammered out something that he's very proud of and I'm very proud of as well. We won 2 awards with it. It anyway has a dual purpose because I would like to add something to the discussion about, what our attitudes today about whistleblowing and how things can go wrong, how things could be better in the future. But we also just have a fun thriller for people who are into James Bond or Tom Clancy or something. We've put together something nice.
Well, that's good. So yeah, and to that note, you did win the 2 awards, named Best Conspiracy Thriller of 2022. That's good. for those who like conspiracies, as if they don't exist. Of course they do. And then also the Royal Dragonfly Award for Best Fiction Novel of any type in 2022 as well. So those are good awards. And it says here, John, you guys incorporate all sorts of large scale international narcotics, sex slaves. Boy, my tongue is not working today. Weapons trafficking, and of course the KGB. Who doesn't love the KGB? By the way, I mean they're like a kind of the ultimate bad guy, the ultimate Bond villain. So tell us about the basic framework for the book. And I know as a whistleblower, you don't want to name names necessarily to get, that should not be put into a book. But clearly, you guys had a purpose of like you talked about. You want to get information out about what it's like to be a whistleblower, some of those things. What was the basic premise of the book? What made you motivated to do the book? Is there something within your knowledge of the KGB, the banking issues that you saw? What is it that really drove you to do the book?
Well, there was a particular friend who also is Latvian American, and he knew this author who had just published a historical fiction novel about Latvia and Russia.
Yeah.
And he was pushing us all the time, saying, listen, you guys got to do a book together because this is going to be dynamite. It's going to be really exciting and interesting, and you should do it. And then the way I planned it out with Bill, my co-author, was to make it as a standard thriller. I mean, it could become a movie, for example. It has the classic 3-act structure to it.
Mm-hmm.
Then what we decided is we've got to fictionalize the characters because we don't want people coming after us for this. I mean, actually,
Right.
the villains themselves can read the book how it is, and they'll probably enjoy it. So the only character who's not completely fictionalized would be the protagonist, who's based upon myself, and that's pretty obvious because they say it's a Chicagoan of Latvian heritage who gets recruited to work for this bank in Latvia, which is pretty much me. Then some particulars about me are changed around to fictionalize me, but in general, that's me. And then we have a slew of other characters. The media comes big into play in this. The failures of the media, we have some good and some bad in our media characters. The government people, the development bank people, we have all these characters. And from my experience actually living through this and living in Latvia several years and getting to know these people, really added to it. Also, Bill lived for several years in Ukraine and has a passionate interest in the area. He's not of Ukrainian heritage. I mean, he's just an American guy. But anyway, he's always been fascinated by Russia, Ukraine, Latvia, by this whole region. We've put together an oligarch character, the protagonist, the journalist characters, the politicians. I think we've put together a dynamite cast, and it really gets into what can go wrong with financial regulation, what can go wrong with whistleblowing, what can go wrong in the media. We put a resolution into it. It's actually based on a real cover-up, and the real cover-up is still going on. So
Right.
nothing has really changed there. And it does actually connect to the name of the bank that I did work for was called Parex Bank of Latvia, and it was connected by the Spanish court in the Tambovskaya mafia case, which was a mafia from St. Petersburg closely connected with Putin's rise to power. That Parex was named by the Spanish court as the money laundering service provider to that mafia. And that mafia was doing the narcotics trafficking, the sex slave trafficking, the arms dealing to rogue warlords, the sort of activity that the Russian government got involved with, not directly, but rather through organized crime groups in order to give themselves deniability.
So let's break that down a little bit because I think it's very interesting for the audience to understand. Putin was very much a strong man who came out of the KGB. And to your point, John, he actually was engaged in not only being that guy you go to behind the scenes. The KGB, after the Cold War ended, became essentially an extension of the oligarchs as well as dealing on black market things. I don't think a lot of people understand that when they talk about blood diamonds, the KGB was heavily involved in Africa in buying and selling the blood diamonds, which are now technically illegal. And within that perspective, the current events being driven by Putin, I think, reflect well or reflect directly on his being essentially a street thug who essentially was a black market guy who actually got away with a lot of stuff. He started this in St. Petersburg. He's just doing it at a bigger level with a larger audience now. Would that be an accurate representation of Putin and who he is and where he came from?
Well, yeah, a strange thing has gone on in Russia, which nobody understood very well in the beginning, was this complete merger between Russian intelligence, the KGB, and the other organs of Russian intelligence, and organized crime.
Right.
And their strategy in Russia, in Latvia, in Ukraine, and other countries as well, was to make agreements between the government and between the organized crime groups, where you would be like a sanctioned heroin trafficker, for
Right.
example, that your heroin trucks coming from Afghanistan through Russia into Europe would be under government protection. I mean, on one level, you're with an organized crime group, but on another level, you pay part of the money up to Putin and then you're protected. So this is part of what has gone on. I mean, obviously, the results right now are tragic in the world, but there are for sure lessons to be learned here. I mean, one thing was lax financial regulation, or that people kind of laughed off the oligarchs for years. There were many opportunities when the United States and Europe and the UK could have cracked down on certain people or could have cracked down on certain things, and they didn't do it. And
Right.
this overall mafia, which is the government of Russia now, just became more and more and more powerful. I mean, the amounts of money flowing through this system in the Baltic states got up to over really hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, not hundreds of millions, but hundreds of billions of dollars going through shell company accounts. But this is something where I would think that if in the 1990s there had been a crackdown, maybe things wouldn't be how they are now. Um, anyway, yeah, obviously with the book, since it's a thriller, we tried to have fun with it and make it into
Yeah.
an adventure. But of course, it's serious stuff now with a real war going.
Well, so that's the next thing I want to do. So you mentioned that your own whistleblowing experience is really not done yet. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, uh, again, why you became a whistleblower? Kind of just the like what drove you to do it, and what's not resolved regarding where you guys are at in the movie right now.
Okay, so when I got hired by this bank, I was not told that that they're completely fraudulent and laundering money, and that my job is to trick everybody. I mean, how they hired me is they said that we're above board, we're doing things legally, we have all the proper AML and compliance and corporate governance things in place to match the quality of any Western bank. So that's what I was told. And then as I was there, I figured out that this is not true, that actually there most of the accounts there are shell company accounts denominated in dollars originated from Moscow,
Hmm.
and that these are not normal depositors. I mean, they're all designed to hide the beneficiaries of the money. Large amounts of money are flowing around connected with certain oligarchs whose name came up in meetings. So I was having some meetings internally in the bank where they were a couple of times mention really bad people who are our customers, like top oligarchs. I mean, known for not only stealing a lot of money but killing people as well.
Right.
And the fact that this was able to go on for so long. But anyway, I had been going out there and telling Western banks that they could trust my bank. And I felt really upset that I had basically deceived a lot of people. I mean, I didn't realize what was going on at the beginning, but I thought that, well, maybe I can put a stop to it now, or I could write what I had participated in earlier by telling everybody what's going on. But then this cover up thing hit me by surprise, which was this taxpayer funded development bank. And the United States contributes some of the money to this development bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development.
Mm-hmm.
They announced after my whistleblowing that they did a due diligence on my bank and found out that everything was correct there, that the assets were not stolen, for example. And they announced that they purchased a stake in the bank from the government. So it was owned by oligarchs. The government nationalized it and put government money into it. And then the government resold part of it to this development bank. And this was supposed to prove that the bank was totally okay and that it had not been looted, even though it had been looted. And later, after this privatization, which essentially made me look like a fraud because it made me look like I was lying that the assets were bad since this development bank bought a stake, it turned out to have been a fake privatization that got reversed 5 years later, where it turned out that the government had actually paid the development bank secretly to make the investment. So the development bank did not buy a stake because the stake was actually worth something, but rather they bought it because they got secretly paid to buy it. I
Wow.
mean, a lot of these scams go on these days, like in the crypto world, where you want to make your cryptocurrency look like it's worth more than it really is. You could secretly pay somebody else to pretend to buy some of it to make the price look higher. So it's this sort of a deal. But this was done by a development bank funded by European, British, and American taxpayers, and
Wow.
this is not right. But it's still basically going on. I mean, all those, there's a successor to my old bank now, which is still partly owned by this development bank, where a report that is not available in Latvia, but is available from a statistical office in Europe, says that that one is similar to the previous one, where it's also due to be secretly reversed. That's something I've been trying to get into the media because it's quite a serious thing. If anyone would wake up in the European Union or the UK or the US and approach this development bank and say, hey, listen, this is not correct that you say that you bought a stake in something because it was valuable and it's actually not valuable and you got secretly paid to do it. So why don't you come clean with the whole thing? And furthermore, since these banks are linked to the Putin regime, uh, there should be even, it's not just technical fraud, it's even worse than that. It's really in danger of causing a massive war in the world right now, and something should be done about this. But anyway, that's still going on, and actually, the war hasn't even changed anything because that development bank still is saying that they own that bank in Latvia. There's a couple other ones as well, banks in other countries that appear to also have similar deals going on with the same development bank, the EBRD, and some of it is it seems, well, there are certain oligarchs who own banks together with the EBRD. There's also certain looting that has gone on through banks that were being supported in various ways by the EBRD. In fact, looting Ukraine, because
Right.
the old government of Ukraine, Mr. Yanukovych and his top money launderer, Kurchenko was the name of that oligarch, ran their money through a bank in Latvia, which was related to my bank, and stole billions of dollars from the Ukrainian treasury, which was the original cost, the original reason why violence broke out in Ukraine back 9 years ago. And these kinds of problems are still continuing. I mean, as people pump money into Ukraine right now, I hope it's going to the right purposes, but you never know. And since certain cover ups are still continuing and people won't talk about what the evidence shows, who knows what could be going on now. But yeah, I would love to have a breakthrough with that. And in the meantime, with the thriller, I'm just hoping to have a fun way in which to raise awareness.
Right. Well, we'll talk about that more in a second. I'd like to break down a little bit more about the Ukraine issue of corruption, because I've argued in the media, John, that the Russians and the Ukrainians are basically two sides of the same coin. They're both countries which are corrupt. They're run by oligarchs. Their community of governance, while they say it's a diplomatic, it's based on democracy. It's really not. I think it's more about the group of individuals who are billionaires who have plundered the respective treasuries of their countries or have control of the industry, which are the ones that really benefit. And at this point, any money that we do send to Ukraine, I don't believe, I have no confidence it's going to go to where it needs to be, especially regarding military hardware. I've talked to folks who say, yeah, when you send something there, you can probably count on about 1/4. Whatever you send in, about 1/4 is going to end up where it's supposed to be. Otherwise, it goes to corruption. Is that a accurate representation of kind of the region, John, from your perspective?
Well, the way I hope the Western countries are doing it right now is to carefully monitor everything they give to Ukraine to make sure it goes to its proper purposes
Yeah.
and things aren't getting embezzled. For sure, in the past, it was not done this way. It was shameful for the entire 30 years prior to now that that money would be given by Western donors or Western lenders to the Ukrainian government, and this money would disappear and it would go into the pockets of oligarchs. And sure, this destabilized the entire country. It built up a lot of anger between different groups of people. This oligarchy that's in Ukraine is related and linked to the oligarchy that is in Russia as well, and in Latvia. And there were a lot of opportunities that the United States and other countries had to crack down on this earlier, to arrest certain people. The biggest oligarch in Ukraine, Kolomoisky, who made fake loans to himself from Privat Bank and caused the largest lender in Ukraine to need a huge government bailout. He is being pursued a bit, at least by American authorities. I mean, they seized some properties and companies that he bought in the United States through fronts using stolen money. He still is not in jail, though, and there must be still money that's hidden. And why this process is taking so long to put him behind bars is just mind-boggling, that there's even a war now and this guy is still free and rich, and maybe he'll lose some office buildings in Ohio that he bought, but he's still out there. In fact, for all the top oligarchs from Russia and from Ukraine, there's not one of them in jail. They're all free, and some of them are sanctioned, but the ones who are sanctioned still appear to be living large, or they ask their buddy to lend them 100 million or something so that they can survive until the sanctions end, something like this. But for sure, there were many lost opportunities to crack down on the money laundering, crack down on the corruption, tell a country like Ukraine, listen, we're not going to give you the next development loan until this list of 10 people are in jail and the stolen government property is taken back by the government. This kind of thing could have worked better. I mean, even for Russia itself, Russia itself is got cleaned out the same way.
So to that point, I think it's very clear that the oligarchs bought politicians. They invested in politicians, and I would argue that Joe Biden was one of those through Hunter Biden, that basically through the whole relationship that they did through the gas and oil development in Ukraine, there was a great deal of corruption there. And obviously, to me, John, anytime you can buy politicians, it's a good investment because it keeps you out of trouble. And so to that point, when you did your book, you said you did this book to raise awareness, which is great. Is all of this corruption woven into the story, and what's your basic kind of 30-second overview of what's going on in the book that people will learn a great deal about regarding your experience and why it's important for them to read the book?
Well, I'll say that we did not feature corrupt Americans in the book. There are some corrupt Americans who are featured in the true story, but we did not put that into the book. I mean, the corrupt people are in Eastern Europe in our book. There is, to the real cover-up and fraud story, there are connections to the Democrats. There's a strong connection to Hunter Biden. This lady in Washington who was the lobbyist who hooked him up with Burisma also was the lobbyist for my old bank and even for the whole Latvian government to try to stop the banks from in Latvia from getting sanctioned, even though they should have been sanctioned much earlier. That's one connection. Another connection is this use of front owners. So it's a big thing for the mafia. They need to have these United States dollar correspondent accounts to run the hundreds of billions of dollars they're stealing through those accounts. Now, if a bank is overtly owned by an oligarch, these days it can't get a United States dollar correspondent account because all the American clearing banks in New York, they wouldn't take on the risk of doing that. However, if a bank says that it's owned by the EBRD, then since the EBRD is supposed to be a development bank supporting democracy, then the correspondent account providers look at it differently. Another thing is, to be fair, I'll mention one Democrat and one Republican also. The bank that I used to work for, it's now kind of reborn with a different name. Besides the EBRD, it has another person named Tim Collins, who's a Democrat, and he's a billionaire from the United States. And Tim Collins, I wouldn't be surprised if he got secretly paid as well to buy his share, like maybe his deal was the same as the deal that the EBRD got. And he has John Kerry flying 3 times to visit the Prime Minister of Latvia to discuss it. The other one, which could be similar, is Bank of Cyprus, which is partly owned by Russian oligarchs. It's partly owned by the EBRD, and it's partly owned by a Republican billionaire who is Wilbur Ross. But between those two banks, Bank of Cyprus with Wilbur Ross and Citadele Bank, it's now called in Latvia, with Tim Collins, it makes you wonder when a famous billionaire from the United States says that he's owner of a company together with some Russian oligarchs, whether he really paid for that or whether he's being used for his name to help them to run dollars through the accounts without scrutiny.
So this sounds like a real whodunit, but with kind of a more complex cast of characters dealing with some of the real situations people are facing today. Would that be an accurate representation of the book and what you see in it? And we have to be quick because we're getting.
There's been so much corruption. Well, we have a lot of corrupt people in the book. A lot of
Yeah.
people aren't who they seem to be in the beginning. And in the real story, for sure, I mean, it's been, I'm still waiting for who's going to do something and finally end this. For example, in the United Kingdom, there are angles that connect it with the Conservatives, and there are angles also which connect it with Labour.
Yeah.
And whether I support the Conservatives or Labour is going to depend on who's going to do something about this first. What I am quite sure about in the United States is they try to bribe everybody. I mean, how much success they have with one party versus the other party, I don't know. But I'm sure they're at least trying to bribe everybody. And yeah, and I don't know about Joe Biden himself, but for sure his son. I mean, it's a common thing to go after the son of somebody to give him money, or the wife of somebody and give them money. So these are all tricks they'll play. But the Russians, they're really aggressive about the bribery, and they'll try every kind of trick that they can think of, setting up think tanks in Washington, for example, or doing payments through controlled development banks like this EBRD. Apparently pays donations and consulting fees to very large numbers of people.
Oh no, I've seen it.
And it's supposed to be because this is their mission to support democracy, but this is not really true. It's hush money for people to spread false propaganda about how wonderful this development bank is, which is not really true.
Right. So, John, thanks for being here today and helping educate us on this whole corrupt banking system. I think people could learn a lot by reading your book. And again, the book is KGB Banker. John's not KGB, right? Right, John? You're not KGB, are you? No. Tell us you're not.
No, for sure not.
No,
I'm
for sure.
Born in the United States.
That's right. See,
he's
talking about the KGB. He's not KGB. And it's available on kgbbanker.com. John, thanks for hanging out and telling us about this. And we hope to have you back at some point when you get more resolution and more progress on the overall whistleblowing issue.
Thank you, Tony. A pleasure to be here.
Great. Thank you. And we're taking a break now. We'll be back on the other end with more of The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer. This is part 2 of The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer, powered by 6 Hour Never Settle. I had a choice what I carried in combat. I always carried the best, and the best is 6 Hour. I'm a big fan of the P320. Have a number. Highly recommended as a personal protection tool. And we are also on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network, also available on America Out Loud Podcast Network. And join us, Project Sentinel, at projectsentinel.net and the London Center for Policy Research, the London Center at lcpr.org. And here we are always on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble. And here we are back again, phase 2, part 2 of our show. John Christmas continues, author of KGB Banker. He's not KGB, just saying for the audience. Don't be thinking he's KGB. And then Chris Cordani, our executive producer. I always here helping keep rolling the records for us. And then Tanya Miller from Hawaii, always vivacious with her readers on. Nice readers, by the way. And then my friend and colleague Elizabeth Breckenkamp, also vivacious from in Virginia right now, I believe. So
in Virginia.
So we're all here together. We're going to continue our discussion of KGB and issues relating to corruption. So as the audience probably knows, I do a lot of interviews relating to oversight, the need for proper documentation to be reviewed by those with authority to review it. And obviously the whistleblowing thing is something that everybody needs to support. So let's start with that. It's very clear to me that there's no good guys in the war with Ukraine and Russia. And I've said, and I think John backed me up on this, they're all kind of oligarchs with their own agendas, and that agenda is to make money and has nothing to do with democracy. So I think that's one of the things that people tend to forget is that we're not actually helping the people of either country by supporting oligarchs. And John, let's start with that premise. If you've got people running the banking system who benefit themselves more than anyone else, I don't see any benefit to either the people of Russia or the people of Ukraine. How do you see that?
Well, the banking system in both countries was for sure totally corrupt and a lot of money laundering and fraud going on. The normal way, it's not even an exception, but the normal way commercial banks were run for many years, I suppose still now in Russia and Ukraine and Latvia as well, is that commercial banks' loan portfolio would be embezzled. I mean, they would make fake loans to themselves or to as payoffs to somebody. So they would say, oh, we have this asset. This asset is a $50 million loan to ABC company registered on an island somewhere. And it's not a real asset because they paid that off to somebody for protection, or they embezzled it for themselves so their wife and their kids can get some new fancy cars and palaces. And that's where this causes economic hardship as well, where the banks I used to work for in the United States were making real loans to real companies, which actually helped the economy. But if the lending of the banks in Ukraine and Russia and sometimes in Latvia is that the money is just all getting diverted into the pockets of corrupt people, and they probably don't even spend it there. They probably spend all the money on the French Riviera or something. Then it's not really benefiting the economies there. And for sure, this is a problem. I will say that I don't consider Russia and Ukraine right now today to be equal risk for the United States. I mean, for sure, since Russia is making threats with nuclear weapons, it's on a different level from Ukraine right now. But but for sure, the economies of both countries were totally corrupt.
Right, we could talk about that, but somebody in the team probably has a question here if they want to jump in.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Speaking of corruption, this is my one point for you, John, is on that corruption note and the influence, like we're talking about blackmail, laundering, narcotics, sex slave, arms moving. And then it makes me think of a 2019 video in which the current president's son was confessing to a prostitute confessing on video, naked to a prostitute, that he had an encounter in 2018 in a Vegas hotel where he claimed in the video to the prostitute that the Russian mafia stole one of his 3 laptops that are gone, and that laptop had, just like this encounter with this prostitute, had many other videos of similar activity. And so his concern that he was expressing on this video to this prostitute mentioned his father was running for president and these activities on there. So I'm just wondering, with his ties with Burisma, this energy company in Ukraine, his cushy deals, his father becomes president despite this information coming out in advance. A lot of us saw it, and we're getting exclusives on Daily Mail or what have you, and yet nothing comes of it on the mainstream media, and yet we are contending with our money going over there and policies and all of the propaganda to support the war. And I'm looking and thinking about corrupt persons that don't really care about the issues that they're propagating to. So that's my point in question. What are your thoughts on that issue, on that laptop?
Yeah.
I don't actually know Hunter Biden. There is a person who's important in all this who I do know and used to work together with. So when I was at Parex Bank of Latvia, which later split off its corrupt business to some other corrupt banks, Parex had a Washington lobbyist named Sally Painter, and Sally Painter's firm, Blue Star Strategies, got subpoenaed over this relationship between Burisma and Hunter Biden because she apparently set it up. Now, that lady, Sally Painter, originally she was like my friend because we were colleagues. We were both trying to spread the good word about this wonderful bank Parex that was supposedly clean, even though it was not clean, and later it collapsed. And later it was also connected to this Tambovskaya mafia. But anyway, what she has been doing in these years since I first was working together with her. So I did this whistleblowing. The whistleblowing got covered up. I got chased out of Latvia with threats. She received a high state award from Latvia. So she's returns back to Washington after basically helping the Russian mob destroy several countries, and with a high state award that she won from a corrupt government for that. And then she's working on projects such as matching Hunter Biden up with Burisma. There was another one. There's connected to Latvia. So another mafia bank from Latvia, Baltic International Bank, which recently got shut down, but for 30 years was doing large-scale money laundering. She matched them up with a former high-ranking person from the CIA to be on their board of directors, Joseph Kofer Black.
Oh my gosh.
And
Look,
she was.
I know
that
Kofer
Sally
Black.
Painter did that as well.
So I know Kofer Black.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, Kofer has not, I guess, been all that astute on who he's dealing with. And John, let me ask you a question. Do you think Kofer went into this eyes wide open, or did you think he was duped? I mean, it seems like they try to get people to legitimize what they're doing. I think that's a great point.
Well, I know about several situations like this, and it's a Russian mafia trick or a KGB trick that they use forever, and that Western people should be more alert about picking up on these things. I mean, one of the things is for a mafia bank that's moving money for the Kremlin's secret criminal projects. If you see that a bank's board of directors is loaded up with people like former CIA, former FBI, this is actually a red flag that what they're doing is not some kind of normal banking, that what they're doing is something where they're trying to show off that they're pro-Western, even though they're not. And they're doing this by paying some people who are somewhat deceived, but maybe not entirely deceived. I mean, what they could have told Joseph is they could have told him that, listen, here are all these reports from all these auditors and ratings agencies, and we had this is something Parex did as well. They had an AML audit where one of the big four auditors signed off this AML audit that we had proper anti-money laundering, even though most of our accounts were mafia accounts and most of the money flowing through the bank was money laundering, that you can just pay one of the big four auditors and they'll sign off that they did an AML audit. So you could show something like that to a prospective director and say, listen, you're not getting your old salary anymore. We'll pay you a big salary if you'll join the board of directors, and you can look at this AML special audit that we got from one of the big four to get confidence that what we're doing is okay. In fact, a project which I'm working on right now, which is two similar people who got similarly trapped. So there was another bank in Latvia, there's a whole family of these banks. So not Baltic International Bank and not Parex Bank, but this other one, PNB Bank, had two people on their board of directors. One of them, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, who used to be the head of NATO, and the other one, August Hanning, who used to run German intelligence. So this bank, PNB, it went through several name changes, but that was its final name, was laundering money for North Korea, apparently. And these two guys were on the board of directors. And I'm sure that when they got recruited, they were not told that it was North Korean money going through the bank. And now I understand from recent articles I've read is both of them have their homes garnished. So because money went missing from the bank. This is going to happen to Kofer Black as well, as that he's going to find out he doesn't have his house anymore. Because tens of millions of euros went missing from this bank. If you're on the board of directors, you can have liability for these things. And even if you have the best, I know because I've been a company director before, even if you have the best insurance, you think, the insurance company will for sure think of some kind of excuse not to back you up when they find out that you were director of a company that was, running Russian mob money or North Korean money. So, that's one way that the Russian mafia tries to trick people, but it should be easily detectable. I mean, if you see that there's a bank and the people on the board of directors are not bankers, but they're all former spies, then this
That's
would
a
be a
clue.
clue that something strange is
That's a big
happening.
clue right there.
Yeah. So John, to that
So-
point, I had I'll let you go in 1 second.
I'm sorry.
Elizabeth, I want to hit this, but so just so I don't know if you all knew, I was actually given a defensive briefing by the FBI back when Anna Chapman was running her spy network. And to your point, John, the KGB at the time were shopping for influence in Washington. They weren't necessarily going for classified information, but back when Anna Chapman was running her network, they were looking for influence. So it sounds to me this is a common tactic. The FBI actually called me and told me that I was going to be approached, basically the time frame was going to happen and what to do, because as a whistleblower myself, the perception by the Russians is, well, he's open to being approached, and they were just going to basically put on the table a certain amount of money and say work for us. So from what you're saying, it's pretty common for the Russians to do that sort of thing.
Oh, they have. There's a guy who was somewhat of a friend of mine. I mean, he wasn't from Parex Bank, but he was involved in this stuff. And he approached me after my whistleblowing was finished, after I was in exile. I'm not even going to say where I am. This is something about being a whistleblower. I don't tell anybody where I
don't
am
blame you.
anymore.
Right.
But
I understand.
this guy approached me and he said, John, you should figure out by now that the Western law enforcement, they're screwing everything up. They can't, like, even clues can hit them in the face and they don't even react. That he says that I was really good at my old job at Parex, convincing the Western banks that we were not corrupt. But he says that he had a different financial company that was also connected with Latvia and with Russia, and that his company had a problem in the UK, that their account with their British bank got closed and they need to open a new British pounds account. And he says that I have the personality that's right for this, where I can go, after I give up on the whistleblowing stuff and I admit that the Russian mafia is going to conquer the world and that the West has no chance, that if I sign up with them again, then they'll forgive me for the first whistleblowing. That he actually told me that. And that also I can go to the UK for them and spread the good word about this other financial company, which needs to open a British pounds account, presumably to run Russian mafia money through. But he was saying that, no, the flexibility these people have, I guess they figure out that certain people have certain demeanors that they can talk to Western people and Western people trust them and other people don't. But in my case, I refused this, and it seemed even absurd to me. But I thought it was funny that they even asked me to do the same thing again. Like after one time getting set up as a front, that they'd asked me another time to be a front.
Gotcha.
It's about that time, gentlemen.
Oh, shoot.
Sig Sauer brings us Tony's take, and we always like to hear Tony's take. Sig Sauer, never settle. I don't settle for silly questions, although I will. I won't settle for silly questions that I think are at least funny. So I don't think are at least funny. So we'll do that another time. But we're looking for Tony's take on things that are going on, and we have a full house here, so we'd like to hear from you guys as well. Tony, first off, a lot of talk about banning TikTok.
Banning TikTok.
Right. The idea is it's idiotic, and I understand that it's contributed to the dumbing down of society, but what hasn't in the past 25 years? Having said that, we understand there are Chinese there are Chinese Communist Party influences and potential spying problems involved with that. We get that, and data collection problems. We get that too.
Right.
Problem is, in a free society, we have to operate as such where we have to allow people to take these risks and the whole caveat emptor thing. Let the user beware instead of buyer at this point. But the idea is, what's your take on this between the fact that it's a free society, but we do have a serious national security issue when it comes to TikTok?
I think people need to understand today, anything you put on your phone, if you put something on your phone, if whoever developed that program basically has complete access to who you are. That is to say, no matter what, how benign it is, if it's just Angry Birds or it's a weather program, it gets access to everything. I don't care what the end user agreement says. I don't care what button you push. It has access. And once you have access to this, it has access to this, to everything else, your life, everything that you are. So that's to your point, buyer beware, because the moment you allow that, you've compromised who you are. That's period. And this is something that I don't think people fully have appreciated, that these corporations who give you these great tools, and they're great tools. There's some great stuff on the phone. I mean, let's face it. Who doesn't love Angry Birds as a real cultural icon for something that needs to be on their phone? I mean, wow.
Or
How do people
Crush.
not live with that on their phone? But the point is, TikTok does not only dumb down people, it takes what you do and categorizes it, and then has the potential then to feed that to the people who own TikTok. The people who own TikTok are not a company. It's the government of the PRC, the People's Republic of China.
Right.
China is a communist country. They do not permit any company to be quote unquote private. Even though they say they're private, they're not. They're owned
not.
essentially in some form or allowed to exist by the state. The state has access to everything. So by extension, then, I'd like to believe I've just made the linkage between your personal data, your life, the device that you use to talk on or you email on, to the programs on the device you talk and email on, to the people who own that technology, which is the people at TikTok, the company, and that company then goes to the Chinese government. That's it. So as long as you are okay with the knowledge that anything you say, do, or share on your phone is also carbon copied to the Chinese government. As long as you're okay with that, that's fine. But that's the reality of which it is. So it's not just about dumbing down America. Trust me, we have enough of that already going on. We're not worried about TikTok doing that. What I'm worried about, and other experts are worried about, is the data. It's all about the data. And people don't understand how valuable your data is, and how that data, once analyzed, can be used as a tool of psychological influence back at you. Ultimately, that's what they're trying to do with this. It's not about just having the data. It's about what do you do with the data, and what they do with the data, obviously, in this case, is for purposes of social and cultural manipulation. That's what's going on.
Did you happen to see Tucker last night, Tony? You probably didn't see that segment, Tucker.
No.
I don't know if anybody else saw that segment by Tucker Carlson, but he did share something along with Luke Radowski of We Are Change, and several other people out there are sharing that although we agree with this whole concern about needing to restrict the data that they have and the access that they have to through TikTok and the addiction to and all these other things, it is a problem. However, it's the verbiage. So when you got the left and the right agreeing, it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And he started raising the point. And I think Rand Paul is someone else. There's a few other people speaking out about it, because when they go to look at the meat of this bill, what's going on here? And so it seems as if they can make enemies of us and podcasters, people who use VPN. So it's in the verbiage is what's making this dangerous. So we want to agree with it. And for these restrictions, for the very reasons you brought up, but for other reasons in the verbiage, we're like, wait a minute, are we going to be ensnared in something ourselves where we're going to be pulled in ourselves as a problem? I don't know, Elizabeth, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, when you want to outright ban something, well, then that's when the people who oppose you say, well, if you want to ban this, then we'll ban that. It's always like, like they're going to go against something that you like. So yeah, outright ban is generally not a good way to do something, because then that just makes people want even more. But yeah, Tanya, you're absolutely right. It is about the verbiage. When you dig deep, once again, we've talked about this before, when people don't dig deep enough and it just sounds, the fluff on the surface sounds nice. Like, oh yeah, we'll just all agree. Yeah, you have to dig deep and see what the verbiage is. And yeah, you're right.
They're calling it the Patriot Act of the internet.
So, look.
Called the Patriot Act, and so people be like, "Oh, I'm patriotic."
Well,
it's so misleading. It's misleading.
Let's take a step back, and you guys, John, Tony, you know this as well. The Communist Party of any nation will do their best to take down a free nation, and this is an easier way to do it. Used to be they'd have to put in the effort to fly some nepo actress, daughter of another actor that was more famous at the time, to sit on a weapon and insult the country of their targetry, if you will.
Oh yeah,
in Hanoi. But anyway, thoughts.
But she looked really good on an anti-aircraft defense system. I think her butt on that aircraft thing was pretty cool. I'm just saying.
She still looked like a traitor.
Airplanes, you need to look good doing it, right? That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
Speaking of
she
shooting,
does not look good.
A real quick plug for 6 Hour. I keep forgetting this. So 6 Hour is our sponsor. I'm a big fan of the P320. This is one of my favorites here with the with the all sorts of gadgets on it. The light, a light is very important for night when you go out at night, we're looking around. And I highly recommend it. Never settle. So 6 Hour brings you Tony's Takes, and we're ready to continue with Tony's Takes, aren't we, Chris?
Well, let's get Tony's take. And John, I want your take on this too, because you lived in a country after Tony's take. I want to get your take. You lived in a country where they don't allow this sort of thing. And this country's on the brink of trying that each time. But there are counties fighting back. Manatee County recently has proclaimed itself as a Second Amendment sanctuary county. There are more of these things happening in municipalities and counties around the country. Looks like it could happen with states, and it may be a way for a lot of areas to fight back against the taking of such Second Amendment rights away, or at least the attempts to do so. Tony, your thoughts on the progress of the Second Amendment sanctuary city and county?
Well, look, the left has been doing sanctuary cities for decades now. I mean, the whole idea that you can be a citizen of a foreign country and be in New York or Honolulu or DC, Detroit, and the city will not enforce the law. So turnabout is fair play. So the idea is basically, in this case, counties refusing to follow federal law, which actually violates the Second Amendment and the Constitution. So I'm all for it. And I live in North Carolina. You all know we live in a county which is very liberal. People actually have open carry. I see people on a regular basis who are carrying weapons openly. I am often, as I always say, I've always got a SIG close to me. That includes when I'm outside the house. 6 Hour is obviously my choice for concealed carry. The P365 is my favorite weapon for being outside the house. And so it's all about personal protection. And to that point, Chris, and let me make this very clear. If you see me in public, nobody even knows I'm armed. And that's the whole idea, is that if you're out and about working, exercising, just hanging out, shopping, you have the right to be prepared to defend yourself. And that's all it is. And the idea that somehow having a gun-free zone where only criminals or terrorists or the mentally handicapped are able to be armed is completely insane. So I support the sanctuary cities and locations.
John, you lived in Russia, where they don't allow citizens to arm themselves, or at least the regular citizens. Quick take on that.
I can make some
this
comments
revolution
on
in America. Yeah.
I mean, regarding gun control, regarding even people spying on you with TikTok, neither of those are my areas of expertise. I mean, about the proper way that gun control should be done, or how to counter surveillance by Big Brother. But for sure, something I'll say is that it is scary, the level of corruption of modern day governments, that modern day governments are setting all new records of corruption, and you can't trust the police. You can't go to the police for help. Chances are the police could be working for the same people who you're trying to blow the whistle on. I mean, that's what happened to me. In this sort of a situation, sure, if the police have all the guns and if the police are watching everybody's TikTok and they know everything and that they have all the power and everybody else has nothing, then this is totalitarianism or communism, or it's a bad situation. So I'll say that, but about details about what I think about gun control or about TikTok, I'm not going to say.
Well, it's okay. Well, I will, because it's my show and I get to talk about those things. And obviously the TikTok thing is something that everybody needs to control and be concerned about their data. It's all about the data. There was a movie years ago called Sneakers, and the tagline was, "It's all about the data." And by the way, it's only gotten worse since that movie. By the way, that was a great movie with Sidney Poitier and Robert Redford and a bunch of other notables folks. So anyway, so we're wrapping up, right, Chris? We're at the end of another great episode, right?
Well, we are approaching the very end, and if you want to check out some of our past episodes, you haven't done that yet, you can find them in several places, especially the America Out Loud podcast network. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We do a video on the Project Sentinel YouTube page as well.
Great. And so, John, thank you for joining us today. Again, it's KGB banker, but John is not the KGB banker. He's not KGB. Let me be very clear. He is not.
I'm
KGB.
Against the KGB.
That's right. He's against the KGB, as we all are.
KGBbanker.com.
That's right. And so so FBI, if you're listening, we're all against the KGB. Just saying, okay? And then we are. No, I'm serious. We are. And then
That's right, we are.
and then obviously,
It's funny we have to see it. Yeah.
shout out to my friend Cherie Curry. Cherie does our bumper music, Rock and Roll Oblivion. She's on tour right now as we're taping this. So hopefully she'll be back safe in the United States very soon, so she can get back and participate in all these great things we have going on here with our project. So that's it for this week. This has been The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer. My colleagues have been, Chris Cordani, Elizabeth Breckenkamp, and Tanya Miller, and obviously we're special guest John Christmas. So we'll see you all again very soon, and thanks for being here.
I woke up in a derelict delirium to a stranger's kiss and a broken opinion.